Welcome to this episode of Profess Hers, a podcast about movies, music, history, pop culture, current events, and literature, all discussed through the perspective of women's issues and feminism.
I'm Allegra. I have, just confession, I have seen every episode of Grey's Anatomy at least twice.
You've talked about Grey's Anatomy a lot already. We're only on the 4th episode.
I love it. So I'm clearly a mix of Dorothy from Golden Girls, Roseanne, Monica from Friends, and Billy Eichner's character from Parks and Recreation, who's named Craig. It's like a comedic yelling, like a non-angry yelling and then storming out of a room, but very declarative. I love him. And
I'm Misty. I only have one TV in my house.
Yikes.
I relate most to Sophia from Golden Girls. And
Which
then
one's Sophia?
The old angry lady that's very sarcastic but funny. And then Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec. I aspire to be Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec.
Most smart women do.
So as you may have guessed, today we are talking about television.
So we're very excited about talking about TV. We both, Misty and I, love television. Not the same shows.
No.
What's your favorite TV show?
Ever?
Right now that you're watching, that you watch. It's on. It's current.
That's on right now. That is current. Okay, I think it has to be Handmaid's Tale.
Okay.
Because I love the book so much.
Yeah.
I love Margaret Atwood.
It's great. It's a good show. I haven't seen the second season. Don't throw anything at me.
And you?
My favorite TV show?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to say, obviously, other than Grey's Anatomy, The Good Place.
Oh, it's very good. I like it.
The show.
It's smart.
And I like the podcast.
Yes.
And I aspire to be as good at hosting a podcast as Sean.
And Mark Evans Jackson?
Yes.
Yes. So what we're going to do today is kind of a survey of American television history and how women have been portrayed.
I promise I won't let Misty talk too much about history.
Yay, history.
No.
But
we do that in every episode.
But we're not going to spend a deep dive in any one show. We're going to kind of do like medium dives in a bunch of shows.
Yeah.
But later we can do some deep dives in different shows and really get to the nitty-gritty part of this.
Absolutely. In fact, we have planned for future episodes and episodes dedicated specifically to The Handmaid's Tale, an episode about Orange is the New Black.
Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Oh my God, she loves this show. I've never seen it. We want to talk about some current sitcoms that are on TV right now, including Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and The Good Place. I would like to talk, of course, about Shondaland shows, including Grey's Anatomy, How to Get Away with Murder, and Scandal.
And at some point, we'll have to talk about reality television and that portrayal of women, because that's also very important.
That, unfortunately, it is. I just want to call it all a trash can, but...
It's a dumpster fire, but it's important.
The Real Housewives. I can't wait to get those sound clips going. Man.
So, Allegra, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do you believe that television is a reflection of American culture, or do you believe that television influences American culture?
That is a hard, difficult question. So, as an English teacher, I'm inclined to say that all creations are reflections of the culture, but I think it's not an accurate reflection of the culture. I think our culture is more diverse than what's portrayed on TV, and I think perhaps because obviously there's a lot of money and power involved in production of television shows, it's not reflective. But it is reflective of the power dynamics, I guess, in our culture. I mean, TV even now is mostly white and mostly male.
I'm really glad that you worded your answer that way, because...
Did I win a prize?
You get a gold star.
Okay.
You get a sticker. All right. So what I was going to say was it is more reflective now than it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I think it was aspirational,
mm-hmm.
and I think now it is more reflective. Not entirely reflective,
mm-hmm.
but more reflective. So can I do my history lesson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I promise I'll heckle you, though.
So in the early days of television, we're talking 1940s, 1950s, we didn't really have the kind of television we have today. It was a lot more focused on just facts and sharing information.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the 1950s, it becomes more of like what we think of today with entertainment. And I guess we should say that, right? We're only talking today about entertainment television. We're not talking about news.
We're never going to talk about the news.
Okay.
I'm just going to put that out there right now. We're just not going to talk about the news.
Awesome. Safer. Much safer. All right. So by 1954.
Plus, I spend like half my life talking about the news.
Yes.
All right.
So in 1954, over half of Americans now have TV and have become TV consumers. These are black and white TVs, and they're 1,000 pounds each, and they have 4 channels.
The big ones and the big wooden boxes.
Yes. But we have TV.
Okay.
So this early day of television is aspirational. It's an idealized, sanitized version of life, and it reflects this thing in the 1950s we have called consumer culture or consensus culture.
What's that? I don't know what that is.
So, Allegra, when you were little, did anybody ever tell you, you're special, nobody is you the way you're unique, you let your unique star shine?
Are those things not true?
Well, in the 1950s...
I feel like my parents still tell me those things.
Because you need a lot of affirmation in your life. In the 1950s, we would never have told kids that. We would have been like, be the all-American kid.
Okay.
If you stand out for something, stand out for being the most normal and the most American, and don't be a communist.
Okay, so there's no letting your freak flag fly.
No. Get in line.
Okay.
Get your hair cut like everybody else.
All right.
Wear the same clothes.
Play football.
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about when Marty McFly goes back in time.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. So consensus culture.
This
we
is
all
how
need
I
to be
know
the same.
history.
That makes me so sad. All right. So even in those early days, though, government realized that TV has the ability to shape our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so the FCC, which was originally created to regulate radio, is going to be asked to also regulate television.
Okay.
And so
the Federal
Communications Commission.
Got it.
And so Congress is going to tell them to regulate obscene and indecent material.
So, but why are the Real Housewives still on TV then?
Well, because our standard of what is indecent has changed. But if you want to call and complain, apparently there is a number you can call and complain.
I'm sure many people's grandmothers,
are calling.
grandfathers,
All
the
the
same
time.
people who call into C-SPAN.
Yes. So you can never show something that's obscene on your network shows.
Who decides the definition of obscenity?
That's a great question. And again, it's set by the community standards. So what is obscene to us is probably super obscene in the 1950s.
Okay.
So this is a highly sanitized, unrealistic version of American life, right?
Okay.
When we look at our 1950s shows, and I'm going to talk about 2 in particular, Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy. They're very different women here, June Cleaver and Lucille Ball, and they're playing very different characters, but they do have some traits in common. They're both housewives.
Yes.
Both of them are functioning primarily as helpers to their husbands. They're not independently on their own. That, even in 1950, is not a full reflection of women in America, because 1/3 of women were already in the workforce.
Interesting.
Yeah,
But not on TV.
But then, well, obviously not on TV.
Okay.
But 1/3 of women already are working outside the home.
Including, it just occurs to me, the people portraying these characters.
Exactly.
Working women. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So if we're talking about your kind of typical 1950s housewife, the stereotype, that's got to be June Cleaver, right?
Okay.
So she's on the show called Leave It to Beaver. And this is the theme song. It ran from 1957 to 1963.
It's a longer than I thought.
Yes. So this is your 1950s nuclear family. Mom, dad, 2 kids. They have the white picket fence. Everything is very sanitized in their lives.
Why is it called a nuclear family?
Because it's like a nuclear atom. It's the ones.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So this family is really aspirational because they have no problems that cannot be solved in 30 minutes or less.
That's true.
There's never any real conflict.
Did you watch this show?
I didn't, but I teach this in my class.
You teach?
I teach 1950s culture.
Okay.
And so I use Leave It to Beaver as like the idealized, what we're all trying to get to. And then when people didn't live up to it in the 1950s because they weren't savvy consumers the way we are, they felt like, oh my gosh, why am I so broken? Why am I not fulfilled by this? Why is my life not perfect the way theirs is?
Aww.
Yeah, actually people, because we weren't good consumers yet of media, when the man and woman who played these roles would go out in public, people actually thought they were married. Yeah, they didn't understand that this is just
it's
fiction.
Funny, but at the same time, I feel like people still do that, right? People still see actors and think of them as their characters.
Yes.
I mean, I know that happened to the people on Friends sometimes, but we'll talk about Friends later.
All right, so then the other show I want to talk about from the 1950s is I Love Lucy.
You do?
I do. Can you guys tell Allegra's super excited? She learned the soundboard.
These are both very iconic theme songs, though.
They are. So Lucy is different than June Cleaver, even though she is a housewife. So first off, Lucy is not waiting at home for Ricky to tell her what to do.
That's true.
She is off doing her own thing.
Coming up with schemes.
Yes.
That's what I remember about her.
Yes. She's also different from other actresses that were on the air at the time because she did very physical comedy.
Oh, that's true. She was falling down and...
Yeah, and that wasn't seen as necessarily appropriate for women to be doing at the time.
Interesting.
Yeah. And she was very proactive in wanting to do that. She felt like that was kind of her niche.
She's good at it.
She's very good at it. She's also going to become pregnant during the run of the show. Mm-hmm. And that was a problem.
Was she pregnant IRL, like in real life?
Yeah, in real life. They would not have written it in the show if she hadn't gotten pregnant in real life.
Interesting.
And then the problem was they couldn't say pregnant on the air.
What?
Yeah, because it was indecent. It implied sex.
For the love. Where did I think babies come from?
The stork. So they had to say things like, the stork is coming, or we're expecting, or a baby will be arriving. It's very passive, right? We're using this passive language. This baby just shows up with a big bow on it. I don't know. This is a little bit different than what we said before, but Lucy and Ricky are actually married in real life.
Yeah, that's true. They were, yeah.
And they had an interracial relationship.
They did.
So 1950s, and we have an interracial relationship on air. I know, isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Her role here is very different than other 1950s stars. Now, does she have some room to improve? I mean...
He does spank her.
Yes, that's problematic. A little bit. She gets her money from him. Like, she gets an allowance.
Yeah.
Problematic.
And there's a lot of her being a clothes horse, right?
Yes.
Shopping and buying clothes and then... And
having to lie about it.
And there are jokes about Ethel's body that are problematic for me. Yeah, so, yeah.
The other thing is they all smoked on air because one of their sponsors was a cigarette company.
Oh.
So it's like product placement.
I always thought it was interesting that they had cigarettes in a drawer.
Yeah.
Like there was a place in their home where they kept their cigarettes. It's very of its time, I suppose.
Okay, but you know what's not of its time for her?
That?
She actually owned her own production company in real life.
Wow. So she was like the Oprah of her time.
Kind of.
Okay.
And then when her and Desi divorced in real life, she bought him out. And it became solely her company.
Interesting. Desilu Productions?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember from the...
She hired female writers, which for the time was...
I wasn't aware that females knew how to write in the 50s.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. A few of them. And she actually made one of them a head writer.
Wow.
Which for the time is very groundbreaking.
Okay, so I'll stop making fun of I Love Lucy.
Yes. The women that go into comedy later, like Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, they often cite Lucy as being one of their role models, not just for what she did on screen, but for what she did off screen.
For being a lady boss.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I like it.
All right. So then if we jump ahead a little bit and we get to the 1960s and 70s, things are changing in America, right?
Yeah, as we discussed.
So we have the women's rights movement going on, civil rights movement, and women are entering the workforce. About 40% of women are now working. Okay. So that stay-at-home housewife, while it is still a part of the American life and it's still on TV, our shows have to start reflecting something a little different because society is changing.
Ladies are getting jobs.
Yes.
Okay.
And not necessarily because they want to, right? Some of this is because they have to.
What kind of jobs are ladies getting?
It's really across the board. This is the first generation of women who have college educations in large numbers. So we do have some women entering professional positions.
Okay.
But you do have a lot of women entering secretarial positions. School teachers are becoming more female. Lots of change. So one of the early shows that reflects that change is going to be That Girl.
I've never heard of the show.
I'm going to be really honest with you. I vaguely know it, but I don't know it. This is more academic than it is personal.
But so it's features a woman who gets a job.
Yes. So Marlo Thomas is the primary actress here.
Okay.
And she is going to not only be the main lead in this, but she also does have some influence with the production of it.
Okay, that's
She's
good.
going to get to voice her opinion on storylines. And the reason she's able to do that is because she comes from a pretty well-known Hollywood family. If she had been another actress, her weight here might not have carried as much.
Okay.
This show is going to be on the air from 1966 to 1971.
Okay.
And when I said earlier that Thomas had a voice in this, the first couple of scripts that she got, she rejected them because she thought the character was too much of what she had already seen.
Interesting.
And then she read Feminine Mystique, and she brought this back to the writers and said, can we incorporate some of these ideas into this role? So,
Really?
Yeah, so Betty Friedan showing
Okay.
up here. All right, so her character is going to shift after that rewrite, and now she's a young actress going to New York who is looking for a big break in showbiz.
Okay.
But in the meantime, she has to take on a lot of menial jobs and things she doesn't really care about, acting in commercials and so on and so forth.
Does she get her big break?
Not really.
Okay.
So in the last season, the 5th season, the producers of the show wanted her and the character's longtime boyfriend, Don, to get married. And she refused to do it. She would allow them to be engaged, but that's as far as it went. Because she said if we end the show and they got married, that's telling women that the goal in life is to get married.
Right, and then you don't have to
And that's the end of the story.
go seeking your identity because your identity becomes married to dude.
Well, and
Yeah.
book closed, right? Happily ever after. And
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch after that. So the series ends with them still just being engaged.
I like it.
Yeah, it was a different kind of thing for the time.
Okay, so here we're going to talk about your favorite TV show ever.
Can I confess something? I really don't like this show. It's super important, but
Why not?
Mary Tyler Moore's voice is so irritating to me.
This is the theme song.
Super important show, groundbreaking show.
Yeah. But you don't like the show.
I just can't watch it. I know, bad
Because
feminist.
of her voice.
Her voice, it irritates me.
There's no such thing as a bad feminist. I don't understand why the theme song's sung by a man, but anyway. So why is it super important? You've told me that like 100 times.
Okay, so first off, in 1976, the Nielsen Company, which you know of, right?
Yes, they tell us our ratings.
Yes. They told the networks that they are adding a new category to their demographics.
Okay.
And that new category is working women.
Okay.
And advertisers are going to start marketing towards working women. So we're going to advertise things like clothing, consumer goods, and we're not going to be advertising so much household goods and cleaning goods.
Okay.
So,
Imagine women doing something other than cleaning a house.
right, or diapering a baby.
Yeah.
So they said, look, you guys need to make some shows where we can sell these advertisement slots. And so capitalism at its best.
Who knew that that's where this very important groundbreaking show came from? It's so they could sell
Advertising slots. And at the same time, there's a decision by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that was investigating networks and their hiring of women and how they had denied some women jobs even though they should have been hired. So these two things are happening at the exact same time. It's this perfect storm. We need a show on the air about a professional woman. Mary Tyler Moore is the perfect woman at the time. Let's use her.
Okay.
So I don't know if you know this, but Mary Tyler Moore had previously been on another very famous TV show, The Dick Van Dyke Show,
I did know that.
and she played his wife.
I did know that.
So did you know that in that role, she had to fight to be able to wear pants on air?
I didn't know that.
It was limited. She could wear pants in one scene per episode because the network still wanted her in a skirt to be that June Cleaver-esque housewife.
Again, I have no words.
Yes. So when she becomes Mary Tyler Moore, the original premise that Moore had signed on for was she was going to be this divorced woman who was moving to a new city and taking a new job, and the network wouldn't do it because they thought people were going to think, oh my God, she divorced Dick Van Dyke.
God forbid.
Right. Can't do that. So instead, it's that she's this single professional woman who had previously had a relationship, but it wasn't a marriage. And now she is starting her life over.
Okay.
So one of the reasons that this is so important is that one is she is single. And two, she is working. And not only does she just have a job, you see her go to work. and actually work.
So the show isn't set in the home, and then
Right.
she just disappears, and then you see her at the office.
Yes.
Okay.
Most of the show is her at her job.
Okay.
And then she does also have a home, and she has a friend that lives in her same apartment building. But primarily, this is her professional life that
Okay.
we're seeing. All right. And she does discuss issues that professional women at the time are talking about.
Know why the last associate producer before me made $50 a week more than I do.
Oh, because he was a man.
So
That was her talking about a pay imbalance.
okay.
That the man who had done her job before her, and if you watch the show, you'll see that he's done it way worse than her. She's knocking it out of the park.
Of course.
But he was making $50 more a week than she was. And she found this by doing some paperwork and actually doing her job and filing paperwork.
Well, and at the time, so the boss very, very kind of easily says, "Oh, it's because he was a man."
And you heard the laugh track.
right, but the belief was men were supporting their families,
Yes.
and women were working either as a supplement to a man's income, or just to have something to do to get out of the house,
Or
So-
because they hadn't gotten married yet.
Yeah, and so then they didn't have a family to support. And so it was a joke, but at the time it was a prevailing belief that men should get paid more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she addresses that on the show. She also addresses taking birth control pills. And that was super controversial because that implies what?
That she was having intercourse.
And she is not married,
Oh my God.
right? There's a pretty famous
The
episode
horror.
where she leaves and she's wearing one outfit, and the next day she shows up and she's wearing the same outfit again
What?
because she stayed over
She had a walk of shame.
at her friend's house.
I guess we shouldn't call it a walk of shame.
No.
Now that I think about
No,
it.
we should not. Bad feminist.
I'll just have that left over in my mind from college. You're right. We shouldn't call it that.
So there was that, and it was shocking.
Okay, so tell me about TV in the 1970s, generally, overall.
So generally, it's getting better.
Okay.
It is more reflective of American life,
Good.
but it's not quite there yet. So overall, it's too wealthy, too urban, and too white.
Too urban.
Yes.
So, because everything's taking place in a big city.
And usually one of three big cities.
Okay.
We're in Philadelphia, we're in Boston, or we're in New York City.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
Kansas doesn't exist.
Well,
There is no Kansas. There's no Nebraska. There's no North Dakota.
There's no Texas.
Not really. Well, there's Dallas, but that's a little bit later. Yeah. And there's
And that's-
California, but that's about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, what about racial representation?
So overall in the 1970s, African Americans make up 11% of the population, but they only represent 6% of characters on television. And most of those characters are not in starring roles. So again, not super reflective. And this is also, again, keep in mind, end of the civil rights movement. So that is being noticed.
Okay.
It's definitely on the radar.
Okay. Let's talk about the 80s.
All right, because this is when you started watching TV?
Well, I mean, that's right. So that's when we were born, is the 80s.
Yes.
And when I was a kid, I don't know about you, but this is not true for Misty. When I was a kid, I was not allowed to watch 3 shows, and only 3 shows. The Simpsons, because my mom thought it was gross. Married, well, actually, I don't know why. Married with Children, my mom thought was gross. And Roseanne.
I did not have those rules. I was allowed to read or watch anything I wanted to, as long as we had conversations about it afterwards.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I read Interview with the Vampire in 5th grade.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that. So I'm pretty sure my mom was trying to avoid being compared to Roseanne because my mom was and is, let's say, not a quiet, meditative person and not a follower.
Not a June Cleaver.
Right. I'm not going to say anything else about my mother on this podcast, but she's not a quiet person and
Not
she's
yet.
not a follower. So, but Roseanne played an important role, and so did the show.
Yes.
And I just want to say right now that we're talking about the original version of the show that ran from the 80s into the early 90s. We're talking about pre-social media Roseanne, and we're talking about pre-all of that. So just, I want to make that clear. Because we're talking about the historical significance. And the reception of a show is as important as the contents of the show.
Absolutely.
So if there's a show that's got all female cast but nobody watches it, nobody cares about it, that is also telling us something about culture. Roseanne was well received and demolished expectations for the TV family mom. And that it debuted in 1988. She's loud, she's funny, she's very honest. She is portrayed as the head of her household. In many episodes, she makes more money than her husband. There are lots of episodes where Dan is out of work, looking for a job, and she manages the finances. She makes lots of decisions, and there's lots of jokes where Dan will look at her and she'll say, no, we're not doing that. So there's a lot of actual research about Roseanne and feminism, like scholarly peer-reviewed research about it. One scholar, Rhoda Zook, wrote that Roseanne is remarkable for exchanging feminist discourse with mass entertainment, which is interesting, right? So you don't think about what Roseanne is saying when she's screaming at her husband and kids as being feminist discourse, but in a lot of ways it is. She also active with the writing and the creation of the show.
Because it came out of her stand-up act.
Absolutely, and it's based in some ways on her life. Like, she's from the Midwest. She has a very close relationship with her sister, and so a lot of it is based on the realities. I mean, her stand-up was kind of gritty realism as well. They talk about gender, sexuality, birth control, reproductive rights. They have gay characters, and they don't just have a gay character. They have
As the fall guy?
Right. They have several gay characters. One of them is one of Roseanne's best friends and ends up being a co-owner of her small business. And they also ridicule homophobia. So they don't pretend that everything is rosy and beautiful. It's, again, very realistic. So lots of 1980s sitcoms. I don't know if you remember because you were a baby or a child like I was, but the Cosbys and Growing Pains and Family Ties, all those families were wealthy in some way, at least upper middle class.
They were professional, right?
They had professional working. I mean, obviously the Cosbys he was a doctor. I don't know about Family Ties and Growing Pains, but I remember their houses, right? They had big, clean houses. They never talked about how to pay bills. They didn't. I don't really even think they got into who was cleaning their house, you know. But Roseanne was written with what they're calling a blue-collar sensibility, which I think is like a code for basic human common sense. So she was just very realistic about things. And so she would talk about paying bills.
Well, and it was set in the Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she's reflecting issues that she saw growing up.
Mm-hmm. And
where you do have to make a choice, like, do we get to go on the school trip or do we get to eat this week? Those are real choices for a lot of families.
And it did a good job of showing that people in that financial situation are kind of always on the brink. If one person loses their job, if you're late one more day, you could be in danger of not being able to have electricity, right? There's an episode where their power gets cut off. There's an episode I remember where she can't pay the bills that month, and what she does is she sends like the electric bill to the gas company and the gas bill to the electric company, so she can say, I tried to pay, so they won't cut off her utilities, but she doesn't have to pay. She is kind of stalling for extra time.
I think I remember an episode too where like the school calls her from one of her kids and she like can't go pick her kid up because she's working. And the school was just kind of like, well, but you're just a wife. Your job can't be that important. Just come get your kid.
Well, and there's also episodes where she can't get off work, right? And they say basically like, I'm going to take it out of your check. You're going to get fired. I think I have a clip of that actually.
Roseanne.
I'm looking, Booker. Come on, give me a break.
All right. I'll give you a half an hour, and it's coming out of your check.
Oh, there goes the Porsche. Oh, I just love it when a guy talks sports. It does something to me.
So that was George Clooney, by the way.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, playing
I
her
did not
boss.
know that.
So she has to fight, and actually she has to get out early to go pick up her kid. So it was an important, groundbreaking show. And in terms of feminism, it's great because they talk about their relationships with their husbands. And it's clear that Roseanne has a different, more progressive approach to being married. I'm going to play you another clip where she's talking to one of her friends, her perpetually single friend, Crystal, about men.
And that is when Dan talks about hydraulic jacks and snow tires.
You can joke all you want. You got yourself the ideal man.
Oh, ideal, huh?
Sure. I'd give anything to have a man like Dan. He stays home. He never runs around on you. He's good to the kids, and he's hygienic.
Well, Crystal, you think he came that way? It's 15 years of fighting that made him like that.
Oh, you are so full of it.
I'm serious. A good man don't just happen. They have to be created by us women.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite clips. So anyway, the thing I wanted to tell you as an answer to your 1950s overview is there's an episode of Roseanne where she plays a 1950s housewife. The whole episode's in black and white. The episode is called The 50s Show. It came on in 1995. So she's got an apron. It's a frilly apron. She's very cheerful, bouncing around the house, doing whatever her husband says. Becky is got, blonde curly hair and wearing a poodle skirt, and her boyfriend is like a hunky football player looking guy. And what's funny is this is clearly so different than what the show Roseanne usually is. And so it is an obvious, just the idea of Roseanne being cheerful in her kitchen is already hilarious, right? We can't imagine it. And so the fact that she is doing this very clear satire is to me remarkable, because she is acknowledging that she is a TV housewife now. Like, she's by the 90s, she's a famous, forever cemented TV housewife, but she is unlike all the others.
Yes. And it's more, again, reflective of real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the joke is, look at what used to be on TV and look at the reality that we're trying to portray now. It's a great episode.
So at the kind of same time that Roseanne's on the air, there's another show about 4 women who are friends, and they are very pro-sex, and they're very pro-female, and they're pretty progressive in their thinking.
The Golden Girls?
The Golden Girls.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a great show. To me...
Which one are you?
Dorothy,
the
yes, grumpy one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I asked that. That is true. Yes.
She's just not here for any of it. But she's also, she was, she had a professional job. I like the show because they're all still active. They're all post-marriage, right? Their husbands I think they've all died.
No, Dorothy is divorced.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because Stan is still alive.
Yes.
So they're all post-marriage.
Yes.
And they're all relying
That's a nice way to say that they're widowed. They are post-marriage. I'm going to start using that.
They're all kind of relying on each other. And so it's about female friendships. They have lots of conversations that aren't about men. They have lots of conversations that are about men also, but so do most women. And so it was, I think, very reflective of maybe what a lot of women experience, and kind of saying it's okay to go on dates and have sex and have boyfriends even when you're a widow, or even if you're in your 80s.
And not only it's okay to exist as a woman past the age of 45.
Yeah, and it's okay. Yeah, exactly. Imagine. So this is. I don't know. I can't do math, but this is probably timeline, right? This is June Cleaver 30 years later.
Yeah. These are women who had grown up with the June Cleaver in their lives, right? And then they're on TV portraying this very different idea of what it means to be female in America. Mm-hmm. And they also talked about bills and having to shuffle money around and
to buy all their wicker furniture.
Yes, as they sit out on the lanai.
And their pastel wallpaper.
And another thing I really liked about this show is that they didn't always all get along.
No.
So it showed
in fact, I feel like they never got along.
It's complex relationships, right?
Absolutely.
And they're not all living together just originally because they're best friends.
Right. It was like a money thing, right? They needed roommates.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely different kind of show, right?
And created by a woman, by the way. Susan Harris created that show. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about Friends.
Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna confess something to you.
Okay.
I never watched this when it was on air. I know that's shocking.
What were you doing with your life in high school and college?
I think I was having a life.
I was having a life by watching Friends. That is the life you have.
I never watched this until it was on syndication on like TBS or something. So I was like 10 years behind everyone else on this show. And I don't even think I've seen all of it. I'm 100% sure I have not seen all of it. So I know who the characters are.
Okay.
And I know the basic.
Which friend are you?
Oh. Is there a friend that like doesn't like the other friends and only comes around frequently?
Gunter?
I'll be that. Who is that?
The guy from the coffee
I'll
shop.
be that. That's fine. Silently judging everyone else.
So I think of myself, in the introduction, I introduce myself as a Monica, but everyone tells me that really I'm Ross, right? That
Ew. That's gross.
That I have to, not in the toxic masculinity way, but in the academic, I can be baited into an argument. Have you seen the episode, for instance, where Ross and Phoebe get into an argument about whether dinosaurs are real?
No.
Okay. Well, he freaks out and he's like, got to prove his point. And so there are a lot of things about Ross that I'm similar to. But again, so do you think of Friends as being a feminist show?
No.
Why not?
So I think of it as being popular mass consumer. Mm-hmm. But I don't see any overtly feminist themes in it, and I really don't see very many pro-women themes in it.
There are a few.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say...
Educate me.
...on its whole that it is a feminist show. But I also would say that it was very of the 90s. And as we have talked about previously, right, the 90s were a time of progress, but problem.
Yes.
Right? I
yes.
think that's how we can say it very...
Superficial progress.
Yes, very succinctly. So there is progress. There is... So, for instance, there are these... Let me give you some examples. So there's 3 female leads in the show.
Okay.
Which is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
All 6 people are paid equally.
Okay.
The whole time they're on the show.
The whole time?
They get equal compensation.
Oh, I did not know that. I thought that was a later thing.
So they start as equally compensated and they stay that way. And even later in the series, when a few of them become more of the star because they are who the audience is more relating to, they said, you still have to pay us all the same. Which ended up being $1 million an episode in the later series. Okay. So there are female friendships.
Mm-hmm.
Strong female friendships. Right? They're there for each other. They do mostly talk about guys, but they also talk about other things. The very first episode, which have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay. Rachel's walking out on a wedding, right? Because she's kind of been forced into it by social forces, right? Like no one is making her do it, but she thinks that's what she's supposed to be doing, right? She's of a certain age, she's of a certain social status, and she's supposed to get married, and she's realizes it's not right for her, and she walks out. Why are you making a face? You don't think that's true?
I think everything you're saying is true. My issue comes with Rachel a little bit later.
Rachel is hugely problematic. Okay. I'm giving you the high note. High notes.
This is as high as it gets as far as I'm concerned.
Monica, at one point in the series, when her and Richard break up, she considers using a sperm bank, which is pretty progressive for the 90s. Mm-hmm. When Rachel realizes that guy, Barry, had cheated on her with her best friend Mindy, instead of fighting with Mindy, she and Mindy team up against him. And so a lot of times TV shows want to show you 2 ladies fighting over a man. Right. And that's not what this devolves into.
Okay.
Ross's kid has 2 moms.
Yes.
Now, I'm not telling you that their treatment of gay and lesbian culture is ideal or even good, but it is accepted by everyone in the show that Ben has 2 moms and that the 2 moms are doing a great job of parenting Ben. And then at the end of the show, I know you still hate Rachel, but she decides to be a single mom. And 2 people propose to her basically to keep her from having to do it, and she decides to do it anyway. And then, Monica proposed to Chandler.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, some good notes.
Yeah.
One of the show's creators was a woman, Marta Kaufman.
Okay.
She also worked on a lot of other famous shows. But there are, of course, lots of problems in the show. And its portrayal of gender and gender roles and sexuality. So, give me one reason you don't like Rachel.
So, I feel like, as opposed to both the other female leads, she is shown as advancing in her career with very little effort on her part.
Okay.
and it's just sort of handed to her because she's young and pretty.
Yeah, and working in a department store is not the kind of experience you would need to become a professional in the fashion industry.
Exactly.
So she kind of ding-dongs her way to the top.
Yes.
Yeah. I see it. So my big problem with the show is the way the dudes present gender role. All three of them, right?
Okay.
They're all afraid of being perceived as gay all the time. Ross doesn't want his kid to play with a doll.
Okay.
Do you remember this episode?
No.
He has a doll. He likes this doll. I mean, who cares? And Ross is very up in arms about it.
Because his kid is a boy, right?
Right, his kid is a boy. His kid
Okay.
is named Ben. So, and the other, this is what I want to play you a clip of because it's pretty bad. But everybody makes fun of Joey for having what he calls a man bag. So he goes to get outfit for an audition, and one of the things that Rachel gives him when she's styling him is, a bag that's kind of a cross between a briefcase and a purse, and it's relentless what they say to him about it.
Wow, you look just like your son, Mrs. Tribbiani.
What? Are you referring to my man's bag?
At first I thought it just looked good, but it's practical too. Check it out. It's got compartments for all your stuff. Your wallet, your keys, your address book, your makeup. Hey, I'm off to my audition. How do I look?
I think you look great. Joey, that bag is going to get you that part.
And a date with a man.
Yeah, not the best.
But, okay, I'll say this for it, though. It's a reflection of the time, right?
Yes.
So I don't feel like it was so outside of left field for other shows that were on in the same era.
No. And again, so I don't want to be mistaken for saying what the treatment of these things is good, but they did have they were one of the
They
biggest
opened the
shows.
dialogue?
Yes. That's the best way to say it. They opened the dialogue for a lot of things. And, Ross is probably got the most panic about gender roles. Like, he can't have a male nanny, and he has to... It's unfathomable that a man would want to be in a childcare profession to Ross, and he's got a panic about it. But that happens in a later season. I mean, that's after Rachel has their baby. But in that episode, Ross is really portrayed as the fool. So even though it still has this idea of we've got to stick to gender roles and there's something wrong with this male nanny, but it's starting to look like he's the idiot.
So he's the straw man that we're going to knock down.
Right. Instead of saying the joke is on the male nanny, now the joke's on Ross for being so aggressive about his gender role.
So do you think this is a case of where the writers maybe wanted to be 2 steps ahead of society and they just couldn't go that far?
Yes. I think the same thing happened on Will and Grace, but yes.
Okay. So you think if the same show had been written now with the same writers and same cast, it would look different?
I would hope so. I know for a fact that they would treat Chandler's parents differently, right? Chandler has a transgender parent.
Okay, I did not know that either.
Have you seen one episode of the show?
I've seen a bunch.
Okay.
But I feel like I see the same ones over and over again because that's the ones they play on TV.
Probably. So anyway, he has a transgender parent, and it's a total punchline all the time. There's no... There's a later episode where he has like a heart-to-heart with his parents, but it's not a good portrayal. But how many transgender people were on TV in the 90s and early 2000s?
So again, it's a new idea.
So
for a lot of people, it's a new idea.
Just like its times, it was progress, but not perfect. Progress, but problematic.
Okay. So that's going to get us up to the modern era. And this is where we really need to do deep dives in a bunch of different shows.
Absolutely. And we will.
But I picked one that I did actually want to talk about.
I'm so glad you picked a show I've never watched before in my life.
You've never watched this show?
No.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Law & Order SVU.
Oh, my God.
The Special Victims Unit. Okay, so the reason we're talking about this show is because it's one of the longest running shows on TV.
Really?
Yes. It was a spinoff originally of regular Law & Order.
Which I've seen every episode of.
I've never seen one of that.
Okay, so...
We are just different people.
That's why we're doing this podcast together.
So... It's a spinoff. It actually outlasts the original show now by many, 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 many years. It has a female lead. Mm-hmm. The female lead is now one of the, sergeants, lieutenants, something.
Okay.
Higher up. She's moved up in the chain. So it's showing progression in her career.
I love that you couldn't think of the word lieutenant.
Well, I don't know if she's I haven't watched it in a couple years, but I used to watch it. So I don't know if she's a lieutenant or a sergeant, but I know she's moved up.
Okay.
And this show is, okay, again, really important and does a lot of important things, but can also be a little bit problematic.
Okay.
So this is from several reports that I read. One of the most prominent ways that Americans get their information about domestic violence and sexual assault is from this TV show.
No.
Yes. Yes. So if you're watching this show, there are moments where it gets kind of like a very special episode, after school special sort of thing. And it's because they're actually giving you real statistics and real facts that most Americans wouldn't have access to without watching this show.
Interesting.
Yes. So I think this is an
So they embrace the fact that they're providing not just entertainment, but information.
They try to, yes.
Okay.
Now, on the downside of that, other side of the same coin, they are sensationalizing sex crimes, right? Mm-hmm. Because you still want people to tune in, and this is not a documentary.
Right.
But people aren't going to get that information otherwise. Mm-hmm. So they're playing this balancing act with it. Another really important thing about this show is that they actually have been known to reach out to groups like the NAACP to make sure that their portrayal of certain things is accurate and reflective.
Okay.
Because,
That's
you know,
good.
they always say, like, they have, it's not based on real events, but it's, like, kind of based on real events.
Ripped from the headlines.
Ripped from the headlines. Yeah. So they'll consult those kind of agencies to be like, hey, this is our take on it. How do you think about this? Are we close? Are we getting it right? The thing that this kind of falls apart on is that there is this idea in academic circles that SVU is pushing a post-feminist world.
What does that mean?
It means that the gender of the characters doesn't matter. And in an ideal world, that would be true.
Okay.
However, we're not there yet.
No, we're not.
So having female leads and having these women play detectives is, their gender still just is important. Mm-hmm. And in the real world, that's important.
It is. And you know how I can tell you it is? Are we ready for my statistics of the last TV season? Okay. Females comprised 40% of speaking characters on television shows. The level achieved in 2012 was 42. That's the highest in the history of television. 42% of speaking characters being females.
And how much is the percentage of the average population of women?
More than 50.
Yeah, I think it's like 51.2 or something.
And it's the same. So network shows, cable shows, and streaming programs, all about 40%. It's worse if we're talking about female characters of color, right?
Obviously.
Black characters, 19% of all female characters in speaking roles. So it's not good.
Yeah.
And the percentage of women creating TV shows has been about 14% for like 10 years.
So I have some statistics for you from 2016.
Okay.
And this is from the Boxed In study from the San Diego State University Center for the Study of Women in Television.
That's where I got mine too.
Yeah. So this is from 2 years ago. 91% of shows had no women directors.
That's crazy.
91%.
Bonkers.
Yeah. That's insane.
So, and you have mentioned this before. I think you mentioned this in the horror movie episode, that if you want a more accurate, complex portrayal of culture, then you need a more diverse team behind the scenes and in front of the scenes.
So from that same study, 71% of shows have no female writers.
So it's very hard to get a woman's perspective in a show if you don't ask any women.
Right?
Yeah. And so even when there are female characters on these shows, they're maybe not as complex, dynamic, or realistic as they could be because they're all written by dudes.
Right. And I think that's one thing in the shows that we've highlighted today, that there have been women creators that have been part of these shows.
Absolutely.
And that has helped with the realism of these characters.
Absolutely.
I think most, especially in Roseanne, right? Because she was such an important part of creating it and being in it. And maybe to a lesser extent, the Golden Girls.
So, again, tell us the source of all of that information again, in case anybody wants to look up more horrifying statistics.
So if you want to know about this, Google the Boxed In study, at San Diego State University's Center for the Study of Women in Television. When I went to their webpage, I found reports going back, I think, to 2012, maybe 2011, and they issue this report every year. So you can actually see change over time.
Okay. Is it good change over time?
It actually is not.
That's the worst part. I went back several years, and it just...
And you're like, oh my gosh, we're getting better.
No.
And then like you kept reading.
No, it's not.
Okay, so I think if you think about where we started from, if we started from June Cleaver, and now we are to the point where we have women who can be detectives, and we have women who can be terrible housewives. You don't have to be a good housewife.
Roseanne was not a terrible housewife. She did a great job.
You can have women that live with no men.
Yes.
So we have made progress. But I think the theme of the show is, one, women are people.
Women are people.
And two, we still have some progress left to do.
We do. We do.
So if you were going to write a TV show, Allegra, and you were going to write a character, what would your female character be like? A dainty damsel in distress?
I don't know. That's tough. I want to combine like 5 characters from Parks and Rec. Like I want to take Craig, and I want to take...
I think we're going to have to do a deep dive into Parks and Rec one day, because there's a lot there we can work with.
But in general, I want them to be funny, and that's what I most appreciate about Roseanne. And there are lots of scenes where she's not afraid to make a joke that's edgy. So I want somebody who's funny, and I want somebody who's complex, but more than anything else, I want to see a female character who changes over time, who
evolves,
learns, grows, changes, and is dynamic. And that's kind of the hallmark of an accurate portrayal of a female.
So Allegra, what's next in your lady life?
Well, next in my lady life is I'm going to watch The Handmaid's Tale. I'm going to start from the beginning. I've seen the first season, started over, and watch the second season. I watched the first season by myself because I thought my husband wouldn't be interested, but he wants to watch it all. So
it's really good. He'll like it.
We're going to watch it. What's next in your lady life, Misty?
So tonight I am taking my daughter to a fall festival, and we are going to do a pumpkin chunking contest.
That's not how you say it.
How do you say it?
Pumpkin chunking.
Okay, well, we will try that.
I need you to say it.
Pumpkin chunk. I can't do it. I can't even do it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're going to go to a fall festival, and we're going to drink some apple cider, and we're going to eat caramel apples.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
Wholesome family fun.
Oh, my God. Thank you for listening to this episode of Profess Hers, our podcast about seeing movies, culture, and history through our lady eyes.
I'm Misty, and I love the Golden Girls.
I'm Allegra, and I still love Grey's Anatomy.
We'd love to hear from you, what you thought about today's episode, what you'd like to discuss in future episodes, or just tell us how great you think we are.
Which is pretty great. To connect with us, you can follow us on Twitter at ProfessHers, that's PROFESSHERS, or by email, same address, professhers@gmail.com.
We hope you recommend our podcast to a friend, or check out other podcasts from TCC Connect's faculty.
Our podcast is written by Misty and Allegra and engineered and produced by Austin Haynes and Scott January.
And remember,
don't tell us to smile.